The supposed photo of Josephine, wife of Wyatt Earp, is probably of another woman. The image, in a silk dress, became the cover of Glenn Boyer's book, I Married Wyatt Earp, 1976. Boyer said it was from 1880. However, the photogravure dates from 1914, registered with copyright as 𝗢𝗋𝗱. Mistaken attribution spread from that edition. Tom Horn, former scout in the Apache Wars, roping champion and Pinkerton agent, worked as a cattle detective in the Wyoming Wars. In 1901, he was arrested for the shooting that killed Willie Nickel, 14, perhaps mistaken for his father, Kells. In 1903 in Cheyenne, he awaited hanging while making horsehair riatas, as shown in the engraving by W.G. Walker. In 1864, at age 17, Jesse James joined his brother Frank in the Confederate guerrilla in Missouri, ambushing Union soldiers during the Civil War. After the war, he became a notorious robber. He would not reach 35. On April 3, 1882, at home, he was betrayed and shot in the back of the head by Robert Ford, a member of his own gang. A cabinet card derived from a photograph taken in Nebraska City, Nebraska, around 1875. After Jesse's assassination, Taylor's Copying Company of St. Louis, Missouri, issued and spread copies, catering to public interest in images and to the commercial practice of reproductions. In 1848, Myra Maybelle Shirley was born, known as Belle Starr. In the younger gang, she married outlaws Jim Reed and Sam Starr. In 1886, a card by Roeder shows her posed alongside Deputy Marshal Benjamin Tyner Hughes. Arrested at Younger's Bend in May, she was taken to Fort Smith for robbery. Acquitted, her story changed when Sam died on December 17th. Calamity Jane in buckskins. Martha Calamity Jane Canary wore dresses like other frontier women, but memory comes from the 1895 card by Henry Locke and Charles Peterson, Deadwood, South Dakota. She claimed to be an Army scout, but was likely a camp follower. She inserted herself into the myth of Wild Bill Hickok and was buried beside him. Portrait of William F. Buffalo Bill Cody, taken in the early 1870s, when he worked as a U.S. Army scout and buffalo hunter on the Great Plains. The image records the phase when his fame was growing on the frontier, preceding the traveling shows that years later would shape his public figure and the mythology of the Old West. Mysterious death. In July 1882, in Arizona Territory, gunman Johnny Ringo was found dead near Tombstone, with a gunshot wound and his weapon at his side. Records and testimonies differ: suicide or murder. Wyatt Earp and buckskin Frank Leslie claimed responsibility, but the evidence remains inconclusive. Henry Starr, Outlaw, played himself in the film A Debtor to the Law, 1919, recreating bank robberies. A distant relative of Sam, Belle Starr's husband, he received a pardon from Theodore Roosevelt after helping to disarm Crawford Cherokee Bill Goldsby in a failed escape. He made the film upon leaving prison. He returned to crime and died in a robbery in 1921. A photograph preserved by the family portrays Seth Bullock, first sheriff of Deadwood, Dakota Territory. In 1876, he and Saul Starr moved to the gold rush town to open a hardware store. After the murder of Wild Bill Hickok by Jack McCall on August 2nd, one day after his arrival, Bullock imposed law in the mining camp. Known for the solitary capture of Bill Doolin in 1895, Deputy Bill Tilghman appears here in an earlier stage of his career. In 1883 in Kansas, he joined the group of authorities involved in the so-called Dodge City War. The conflict, centered on political and public order disputes, was resolved by agreements without shots fired or deaths. Richard Little Dick West, former member of the gangs of Bill Doolin and Al Jennings, alternated bank and train robberies in Oklahoma Territory. A fugitive, he was tracked by a posse of federal deputies. On April 13, 1898, near Guthrie, he fell under fire led by Bill Tilghman and Heck Thomas, ending his trajectory in banditry. Born in Texas in 1853, John King Fisher began as a cowboy on southern ranches. Arrested for horse theft, he served a short sentence and returned to the field armed. In the 1870s, he organized a band of outlaws on the border, self-proclaimed Ranger, who pursued and executed Mexican raiders in retaliation for incursions. In 1885, at William Notman's studio in Montreal, portraits were taken of Sitting Bull alongside Buffalo Bill Cody. The Sioux leader agreed to join Buffalo Bill's Wild West for 4 months. The images circulated as promotional material, marking the meeting of indigenous leadership in the entertainment industry. Kidnapped at age 12 in Arizona Territory by Apaches, Felix Tellis followed an unusual path in the Apache conflict. He became a warrior and U.S. Army Scout, receiving the nickname Mickey Free. He lived as an Apache on the White Mountain Reservation until 1914. The 1888 photo is attributed to Daniel F. Mitchell and Irwin Bair of Prescott. The image records in 1903 a camp of lungers on the outskirts of Phoenix, tuberculosis patients who settled in tents, seeking in Arizona's arid climate a treatment then in vogue. There they followed routines of rest, sun, and dry air, in a time when medical resources were limited and migration for health shaped the region. Highlighted clockwise from the upper left corner: Billy Richardson, Johnny Fry, Gus Cliff, and Charlie Cliff, riders linked to the Pony Express. The 1860 image records a group associated with the first express mail routes on horseback, a private service that operated between Missouri and California. In 1889, Manor in Travis County was consolidating as a small agricultural center in central Texas, with modest commercial streets and basic services that served surrounding farms. The official records of 1890 indicate 405 inhabitants, a number that shows a stable community integrated into regional supply routes. Mickey Free, Apache scout for the U.S. Army, appears around 1888 alongside his wives Ethel and Ochehe. Once kidnapped in childhood and later an interpreter among peoples, he took part in campaigns in Arizona. The image records family alliances according to Apache customs during a period of intense border tensions and in New Mexico. Around 1890, a carriage is parked in front of the Beaumont Hotel in Ouray, Colorado, a stopover point for travelers and merchants connected to local mines. The scene records urban daily life in formation: wooden facades, dirt street, flow of guests and workers, and the hotel as a landmark of wealth and transportation networks of the period. Captain Jack Crawford, the poet scout, gained renown in the West as an Army scout in conflicts with indigenous peoples. Later, he toured stages and schools, published poems and travel accounts, and advocated civic education. His works blended memory and exaltation of the frontier, influencing the image of the West. Portrait from 1881. In 1845, French gunsmith Louis-Nicolas Flaubert presented the first single-piece cartridge, a metal capsule combining primer, powder, and projectile. The innovation abolished the separate use of components and set the model that, in common usage, we call a bullet, guiding the transition from loose load to standardized ammunition in portable firearms. Although the photograph bears the caption "Arizona Rangers," analysis of the clothing, low crown hats, short coats, and cartridge belts typical of the 1870s-1880s, suggests it was taken in the late 1870s or early 1880s, when Arizona was still a territory. The official Arizona Rangers Corps would only be instituted in 1901. The James Younger Gang, active in Missouri and neighboring states between the 1860s and 1870s, included Jesse and Frank James and the Younger brothers. Born from the post-Civil War era, it specialized in bank and train robberies. Press publicity and Pinkerton pursuit expanded its fame until the Northfield fiasco in 1876 in Minnesota. Around 1900 in Beaumont, Jefferson County, the Pear Saint Grocery operated under the ownership of Melton Bowie. Recognized as one of the city's first African-American entrepreneurs, Bowie played a prominent role in local commerce. Records cite his skill as a carpenter, a reputation that supported his work in various trades. Deadwood in Dakota Territory was a growing mining camp. Muddy streets, tents, and saloons in rows. The sound of gold pans in the creek and armed vigilance. When Wild Bill Hickok arrived around 1876, the gold fever was attracting migrants, merchants, and gamblers, and formal authority was fragile, maintained by local committees. The image shows Harry Yount, the mountain man, posing at the top of Berthoud Pass in the Colorado Rockies, around 1874. At the time, he worked as a hunter and guide. Years later, he would be recognized as the first park ranger of Yellowstone. The scene indicates the phase of exploration that preceded the formalization of park protection.